We have two still trying to connect, ma'am.
Okay, I'll give him a second just because this is testable. And yeah, I really want him to. I want everyone to have this. It's going to be on TAClog.
Roger, ma'am. We have one more on, ma'am. We are recording as well, ma'am, so we can look at that when they get on.
Okay, is it a connection issue or, I mean, are they hotel people? What's going on?
The one person is off post. As I understand it is a connection issue, but I'm not sure what his specific. Okay. I'm not sure what necessarily his issue is, if it's just his computer or his Wi-Fi.
Okay, so I just want to go ahead. We'll go ahead and get started then. Good that we have it on recording because I want to start out. I know I talked to many of you this morning, but just highlight the fact. Can you guys see my screen too? I want to make sure.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you see like a chart?
Yes, ma'am.
ADP 3.0?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so I want to start by saying we are going to start today, and what we're going to go over is we're going to highlight the fact that this material that we're going to go over today is going to be on your tactical logistics exam. So that will not occur this week. It will occur at the end of next week. But the material that's covered this week will be on that exam. Now, for that exam, it is a multiple choice exam, but with the exam, you are allowed 3 handwritten pages of notes, 3 handwritten front and back pages of notes. So my recommendation to you is that at the end of every class, at the end of every day, that you review the material by writing your handwritten notes pages at the end of each day. That is when I found students be most successful are students that take a bunch of notes during class, because you're kind of going to be just grasping the concepts. It's a little too chaotic most of the time during class to be confident in what it is that you're going to do with that material like right away to put them on your notes pages. So most of the time what I've seen really successful people do is that they take all the notes down. When they get back at the end of the day, then they start writing their 3 notes pages, and that's been the most, I was gonna say, the best way that I've seen the most number of people be successful. Awesome. I have a question. Lieutenant Fredericks, go ahead.
Yes, ma'am. Just for the test, are we going to know, I just want to know how many lessons the test is going to be on, just so we can like space out the note sheet so we know like how many lessons we have to cover on 3 pages, if that makes sense.
It's really the amount of information in the lessons varies significantly. So you're going to have, I mean, the lessons that are going to be covered in this are everything that's under your tactical logistics week. So you can look at all the topics that are there. While we might adjust the schedule, the lessons themselves won't change, but it includes aerial delivery, mortuary affairs, PWO, sustainment overview, sustainment brigades, all the above. I was going to say everything that's on your schedule is going to be covered. It might not be covered at that exact time that's on the calendar, but all those topics, general topics, are going to be covered. But what I would tell you is that there's a significant difference in the amount of information that's covered in aerial delivery versus like the amount of information that's covered in PWO. There's a reason why there's 12 hours of POI for PWO, because there are a significant number of calculations that are required. And like unified land operations, I was going to say, there are no calculations required for unified land operations. So it's, I was going to say, a little bit of a toss up. What I will say is that I haven't seen, if you write small, I haven't seen a lot of people essentially run out of space once they gather all their thoughts and ideas. But I have seen people kind of really struggle to actually write their notes pages during the class itself. I have not seen them be super successful if they try and make their notes pages while they're in the class, because there are just too many ideas coming at you, and it's hard to organize them in an effective way to test. Does that help answer the question?
Yes, ma'am. And then I just had one more follow-up question.
Yeah.
Is how long and like how many multiple choice questions are on the test, and then approximately how long will the test take?
So this answer differs for American students and international students. So we'll give you all that information on the day of the test. Off the top of my head, I think it's 40 multiple choice questions. I don't remember exactly, but I'm pretty sure it's 40 multiple choice questions. I can verify that, but all of this will be told to you the day of test. You'll have 90 minutes to, let me verify. I was going to say, international students, you have an additional 30 minutes. I think that it's 90 minutes for Americans, and I think it's an additional 30 minutes, but I don't remember off the top of my head. But everything will be told to you the day of the exam. We go over a very very specific script, and everything is given to you, as well as in the classroom, we actually like assign a clock, and we'll go through for all your start procedures. They're pretty strict on test procedures. So like you have to put all your backpacks at the back of the class. You're not allowed to have any cell phones. If your cell phone goes off during the examination, everything is like, it's an automatic failure. So all those test procedures and everything, and especially the first time taking the test, we'll make sure you have plenty of time to know and understand all of that. Yes, Lieutenant Marsh. Go ahead. Oh, yeah. Lieutenant Marsh.
Hey, ma'am. So if we have like math questions, will we be able to use like calculators?
Yes, you will be provided, but it's calculator. It will just be they're like little silver calculators, so it's not like a TI, anything crazy graphing calculator or anything like that. It's just this little small tiny silver calculator. So yes, you will be provided those.
All right, thank you, ma'am.
Awesome. Lieutenant, okay, I see a bunch of questions. Go ahead. I don't have any of the names on my on my screen. Go ahead and go ahead and come up on the net and ask your questions. I can tell it's an S, but that's all I have.
Hi, ma'am. It's Lieutenant Marquez. Would we be given a study guide, or it's just we take notes and okay?
So you won't be given a study guide or anything like that. We do, I was going to say, you just receive the material during the blocks of instruction, and then that material is tested at the end. But there's no actual study guide given for this block of instruction.
Okay, thank you.
I see another question, but I can't even have an initial. So go ahead and ask your question.
Hey, ma'am, this is Second Lieutenant Landstrom. I just had a question in regards to the test. So is this test coming up for the block study? Is this going to include like everything we've gone over since the beginning, or is it kind of starting on today's material? Okay, so it's just starting on today's material plus next week's, and then that's what we're going to be tested on.
So exactly. So what you've had so far, you have been through, and I can go over how it is that all those blocks are assessed. So first block that you guys had was the OE, the block with Mr. Wilcox. That isn't assessed specifically on any assignment, but those, especially that risk assessment class, is going to be assessed essentially on your training management assignment, as well as when you do your leadership field exercises. You'll see those topics come through in a number of different assignments throughout the course. Then you went to training management. Training management is assessed through the PE that you guys have already been assigned. So you guys are tracking how that block's assessed. The blocks that you've had for the last 2 days taught by Mr. Haney, all of those assessments have already been complete. It's that dialogue that you have when completing the assessments. So that's already complete. And then this really starts when we're talking about TAC log. The TAC log test, that is now moving forward. The majority, I think almost everything we're going to teach moving forward will be assessed. But I'll tell you at the beginning of every block, like, hey, this is going to be assessed on your TAC log exam if we're teaching it. But today, the whole class, with the exception of the Q&A on the training management, this is all TAC log. This is your TAC log exam. But it's not, we don't try to like hide what's on the, like if we're teaching a block that's on the exam, we will 100% tell you. And if you're wondering, you can also always go back. So the calendar, TAC log, if you're looking for a TAC log week, those are the blocks that are going to be instructed. While it might not necessarily occur at that time, those are the blocks that are instructed on the TAC log for the TAC log exam.
Awesome. Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome. Okay. Do we have any other questions before we get started? Okay. Awesome. So let's go ahead. So I like to talk big picture first because I think that it helps understand. So we're going to go through all the slides, but I actually like to start with this because it helps put everything in perspective for me. And despite the fact that it's not on a slide, you know, I figure if it's in an ADP, then that's sufficient for us to use it. So what you're seeing on the screen right now is we're going to go in and we're going to talk about unified land operations. So we're going to talk about unified land operations today, but really what I want to tell you about first is kind of how everything fits in together. And so unified action is the idea, and we're going to talk about this a lot, is it's talking about coordination, integration from governmental and non-governmental entities with military operations to achieve that unity of effort. So when we're talking about unified action, we're talking about a lot of different entities, much higher levels of thinking. But this kind of just shows you how everything fits together. So that unified action is that synchronization. We're talking about government. We're talking about military operations. A lot of people who've worked, despite the fact that we won't talk a lot about COIN, you really see that linking between government and as well as military operations, which kind of gets to the heart of what unified action is all about. So with unified action, and then we're going to see, we talked about our operational environment. That's the class that you had with Mr. Wilcox. That kind of starts framing. And the U.S. Army strategic roles and support of the joint force. So what does the Army contribute to joint operations? That is unified land operations. So that's really where our course is designed to start today, is with those unified land operations. But I like to kind of give you that overview of, hey, this is unified action, then what is the Army's contribution? That is what unified land operations is all about. So the Army's contribution is unified land operations. So when we say, okay, we're teaching unified land operations, then that is exactly, this is the Army's contribution to joint operations, is unified land operations. So what are unified land operations? We are going to talk about these four specifically on a number of times. So offense, defense, stability, and defense support of civil authorities, okay? Unified land operations. Offense, defense, stability, and defense support of civil authorities. So the other term that you're going to hear is you're going to hear large-scale combat operations. That's, I would tell you right now, if you hear LESCO, large scale combat operations, this is a buzzword in the Army. This is something that you're going to hear over and over and over again. I was going to say, when you're talking about large scale, when they updated FM 3.0 and we were talking about operations in general and Army operations and kind of looking big picture, one of the terms you started to just hear consistently was large scale combat operations. And really where you hear large scale combat operations is really a difference in what we used to hear when we used to hear about COIN. You really see the transition to, and you kind of see that in place. So large scale combat operations, that's the term. And the other thing that we kind of go in when we go into unified land operations is the fact that unified land operations is executed through decisive action. So you're going to hear these again: offense, defense, stability, DISCA. If I say DISCA, I'm talking about defense support of civil authorities. Those four, very critical for you to understand. But know that unified land operations is executed through decisive action, but it's guided by mission command. So who can tell me what mission command is?
The commander will lay out a commander's intent, and then it is your job to reach that intent.
Awesome. So you're getting about the fact that they're provided, that not everything is laid out for you, and mission command really kind of goes through a process, and that you empower subordinates. I think that's a really critical component of mission command. That's awesome. What else?
Ma'am, mission command is when the commander exercises authority and direction, they use like mission orders and disciplined initiative in order to empower leaders to conduct unified land operations.
Were you reading something? Tell us what you were reading.
ADP 6-0, ma'am.
Okay, there you go. There you go. I was going to say, you're starting to use some buzzwords, so I like it. I like it. Good terminology. Awesome. What else? What else does mission command mean? Mission command. Oh, Lieutenant Rodriguez, go ahead.
Does this also consist of the science of command and the art of control?
Definitely. So mission command. So you're going to continue to hear about mission command throughout your time in the Army. And I think, honestly, mission command is going to become even more important. You have to basically understand and execute it as a lieutenant, but you're going to go through, and really when you get, before you become a commander in the career course, you're going to go into especially highlighting those principles of mission command. So you're going to hear about like 6 principles of mission command, you know, competence, mutual trust, shared understanding. We've already hit on a couple of them. And so while you do need to essentially understand those, it's really highlighting the fact that this really enables us to do this. Like, unified land operations are impossible without mission command. If you want to essentially execute these unified land operations, then you need mission command in order to enable that. So in order to, and because unified land operations are extraordinarily complicated, they're complex, and then also it talks about simultaneous execution. So unified land operations, you need to be able to understand what it is. And I actually just read an article like probably last night that was just published by a captain who's getting out of the Army at Fort Bragg. And the whole point of the article was, and it's not like a, super official article, but the whole point of the article was that the commander, his commander as a lieutenant, had really encouraged them to read Message to Garcia, and the Message to Garcia, and how they included this idea essentially in everything that they did. But instead of using it to enable mission command, which is understanding that end state, understanding the bigger picture, they really just use that in place of guidance. So mission command is not just letting people do on their own. Mission command is providing that. Yes, Lieutenant Kendall.
Ma'am, isn't mission command also just like it syncs all the warfighting functions together? Like it's what syncs them all together. So it's like all the efforts used to accomplish the mission.
I would tell
like,
you.
Would you say that it falls in place with the warfighting functions? Not that it falls under them, but just that it helps kind of like synchronize them when you are talking about them.
I was gonna say guided through mission command. Yeah, I think you're talking about. Really, when I hear mission command, for me, it triggers. Ooh, am I on mute? Oh,
no, I can hear you.
Sorry. I was gonna say, sometimes I forget to unmute. So, really, when I'm thinking of mission command, I'm thinking of the principles. So I'm thinking of like competence. So I'm thinking more of those relationships, that mutual trust that's developed. And I'm thinking most of the time when I'm thinking of mission command, I'm thinking of that. The mutual trust that's developed between that commander and those subordinates, the shared understanding. I want that decentralized shared understanding. Commander's intent, I want them to know what it is that we want done. So I'm thinking more, when I think of it, I think of those, really the principles most when I think of mission command. Most of the time I think of those principles of mission command. That's the one that I think of most often.
Right.
Awesome. So we're gonna go. Ooh, sorry. I just want to go down on this sheet. Okay. So after that, we need to understand what it is, and we're going to go into this more. So if you're not, I'm a chart person. I love charts, which is why I like starting here, because it helps frame everything for me, which is not the case with all individuals. Some individuals prefer going through PowerPoints, and we're going to review a lot of these concepts. So don't get worried if you're starting to feel a little bit overwhelmed. Make sure we're going to, or you're like, wait a second, explain to me what the tenets are. I'm confused on tenets. We're actually going to go into depth. That's what this whole PowerPoint is about. But for me, I like to start with the chart because it helps show me how these pieces fit together. And then when I hear, okay, now we're going to talk about tenets, I understand how it's organized in my mind, how it is that all these fit together. So with that, once we go to execute unified land operations, the tenets are simultaneity, depth, synchronization, and flexibility. So with those, you definitely have to know and understand, and we're going to go into depth about what all those are, but understanding what they are and that they enable those unified land operations. Then essentially we go through these, talk about, we don't talk too much, too in depth about principles, operational art, the process. We don't talk too much, but you do highlight the fact you're talking about the warfighting functions, and that's really where I see, so this combat power, the warfighting functions kind of fit in here, providing that combat power. So sure, that's where, when I'm looking at the big picture, those warfighting functions are kind of fitting into that combat power, going through and highlighting those. So if you're looking for this, I highly, highly, highly recommend looking at this chart. So is the chart in the PowerPoints? No, it's not in the PowerPoints. But I will tell you, in terms of understanding critical topics, I really think, and you can look at, it's in ADP 3.0, okay? So no secrets. I didn't make it. ADP 3.0 is where you're going to find this chart. And that chart is going to, for me, it really helps just process everything so I can understand where everything fits into the puzzle. Does anyone have any questions? I would say I would hesitate to go into any real concepts super in depth because we're about ready to go into a slide deck that's going to cover a lot of these concepts, but any general questions before we move on? Awesome. So this is actually a natural, I know it's a little bit early, but kind of a natural breaking point before we head into those concepts. So I'm going to go ahead and give you guys a 10-minute break here because once we get into the concepts, it'll kind of work a little bit better. So come back at 9:10 and we will dig into the slide decks, which will go into those unified land operations. 9:10.
Ma'am, I just have a quick question.
Okay, let's go ahead and get started on unified land operations and decisive action. Can you guys see my slides?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Perfect. Okay, so just to highlight, one thing I want to tell you about our class is that we're going to go through and we're going to talk about a lot of different things. But one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to talk about DSCA, the Defense Support of Civil Authorities, which we already mentioned when we were going through the chart, essentially. But we are going to talk about your experiences. So especially, sometimes I feel like, not that this is intentional or anything, but sometimes the National Guard and Reserve, there are a lot of opportunities where we feel like, okay, maybe this applies more to active duty. But really, when we're talking DSCA, most of the time, people that are in the National Guard have the most interesting experiences to share with us. And I have learned so much, just even as an instructor, hearing about the different experiences that people, specifically in the National Guard, have had and what they've gone on. So really, throughout this course, I'm going to definitely be talking to a lot of the students to share. I'll be asking you to share your experiences. If you've been in the National Guard, especially if you've been maybe in your position for like a year before you've come here, you've probably done something. You might not even know what DSCA is, but you might have already done it. So we're going to talk about that. And really, I found that a lot of the students really expressed how much fun it was, and how beneficial those experiences were for them. And sometimes on the active duty side, like I haven't done a lot of DSCA. So I've done planning for DSCA once, but on the active duty side, I haven't had as many of those experiences. So it's really cool when we're in this forum to have that discussion and just to hear about everything and all the unique things. And every single class that I've taught is different. So there are a lot of times, I was gonna say, maybe this won't be your experiences, but there's a lot of really cool stuff that's done, especially in Puerto Rico. I've heard about a lot of different missions that they've gone on, as well as there was a slicker unit out of Texas. And there's another student, he talked about a lot of really unique experiences that he had, and just the opportunity that they've had to really support the community, be part of the community, and how much fun that is to do. So I love teaching unified land operations. I always actually learn something from you when I teach this class, because every time the experiences differ. So I really look forward to your participation and to hear about your experiences, because it really helps everyone learn from one another. And while I will say a lot of what we do in Bullock does end up being direct, kind of that direct instruction, you're going to hear a lot because we're giving you a lot of information. As much as you can, if you have those experiences, we really do think that it's great to hear about the different experiences that everyone has. So with that, let's get started on our unified land operations and decisive action. So that's one thing that I find kind of interesting here, is that, and why I like the chart so much, is just, especially when it comes out here and says, like, explain the purpose and characteristics of decisive action and unified land operations. And the beginning, what I found is that a lot of students struggled with kind of viewing those two. It was more confusing to them because they viewed them together just because of the way it was written. And so that's why I ended up changing the way I taught it to start with the chart, because then I found it helped place it for them so you guys can see how everything fits together. Okay, so with unified land operations, now we're going to talk about, we've already kind of hit on what unified land operations, you guys can see the slides, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Perfect. Okay. So unified land operations. So we've already talked about what that unified land operations. We are talking about non-governmental and governmental organizations. We're talking about all these different partners. We're talking about really that unity of effort. But what I want to highlight here is that the Army has two core competencies. Okay, you need to know that the Army has two core competencies: combined arms maneuver and wide area security. Okay, two core competencies: combined arms maneuver and wide area security. So yes, are unified land operations executed through decisive action and guided by mission command? Yes. But our unified land operations, is that the piece of the pie that the Army provides to that's the Army's contribution to joint operations? Yes. But at the end of the day, we have 2 core competencies that we're responsible for. So the 2 core competencies that we have are combined arms maneuver and wide area security, okay? Now we get into those tenets of unified land operations. Now, if we go back and think about what we saw in our chart, we went through our whole chart, we went down, we blah, blah, blah. And then after that, at the bottom left of our chart, we see how it goes through and we talk about those tenets of unified land operations. So tell me about what I really want you to do. I'm going to give you a couple seconds to read them. And then I actually want you to talk to me a little bit about what each one of these means. So first, we can go through. Tell me what Lieutenant, let's call on some people. I'm just going to think of names off the top of my head that I remember from this morning. So Lieutenant Delio, tell me, I wish I could see your faces, but tell me about what it is. Tell me about simultaneity. Tell me what it means. Tell me if you can think of an example. Tell me about this tenet of simultaneity. Lieutenant Delio? D-I-L-E-O. Am I saying your name wrong? I think that's how it's spelled.
Ma'am, he's at the latrine right now.
Okay. Then we'll move on. Lieutenant Pearson. Tell me about simultaneity.
Yes, ma'am. I guess when I think of simultaneity, I guess it kind of goes along with combined maneuver. So, supporting tasks at the same time across multiple locations and domains.
Okay, so you're talking about essentially how, and this is what I think simultaneity really gets at the heart at, is that we're talking about multiple locations, multiple domains. You guys talked with Mr. Wilcox about all these different domains. And the idea is that we're doing mutually related and supporting tasks at the same time to essentially achieve, and this really, I think, goes at the heart of unity of effort, is that simultaneity. So great. Also, let's look at explain what depth is. So again, I'm just going off of names that I saw this morning. So Lieutenant Cruz, talk to me about depth.
Like it says right there, it's an extension of operations in time, space, or purpose to achieve definitive results.
So what does that mean to you?
I don't really know, ma'am.
Okay, phone a friend. Someone help her out. What does that mean to you? Lieutenant Wright.
When I hear depth, ma'am, I think of not only like our ability to supply forward line of troops, like as far out as we physically can, but also like in terms of a war of attrition where it's like however the length of time you can supply troops or supply an operation overseas, ma'am.
Awesome. So I like hearing anything that involves logistics. I was gonna say what your answer kind of made me think of logistics, I always love. And it's great. So, and I think depth though really gets at another part that depth really gets at is that, and this is where I think we're really trying to kind of change the way that we think and transforming our mindset from really one of the big things that I noticed when I read the new FM30, which came out like. It's been a while now, but for me it still feels new. So like probably almost 2 years ago now. Yeah, like 2 years ago now, but it still feels new. So really, depth when you're talking about this extension of operations, not only across the battlefield, but time, space, purpose. And really where this highlights for me is exactly kind of what Mr. Wilcox was talking about in his class, is how we're talking about such a different mindset and how we're trying to change our mindset. So really what you're going to find, what I found in my time in the Army, was that we had a lot of NCOs who had a lot of experience with counterinsurgency, COIN. And really this new FM30, it's going from, and this is a little out, but it just helps me place everything. So the new FM30 is transitioning out of that COIN strategy, and then it lists, it really wants you as a leader in this organization to think about a near peer threat. So it identifies the fact that some of our skills have atrophied as this result of fighting this COIN fight for so long. We've had these skills that have atrophied as a result of that. So when we're talking about a near peer threat, you're talking about something on a level that we've never, that really we're not as familiar with. Everyone who's been involved in the Afghanistan, Iraq, which has been, the primary, the majority of the non-commissioned officers that you're going to work with, that's what they know. And that's what my platoon sergeant knew. My platoon sergeant, he was a product of Iraq and Afghanistan. And so when we went in there, I actually was part of the first decisive action rotation at JRTC. And this is back in 2015. So that's really when we were starting to transition to this. And then I saw like the update to FM30 around the 2017 timeframe. So we're transitioning essentially from this idea of this counterinsurgency to this decisive action rotation, and we had to go back to, and you hear people use the term go back to the basics, but really what they're getting at when they say that, I think what they're trying to kind of communicate, but on a smaller scale, is the fact that these skills that are involved in large-scale combat operations, that are involved in a near-peer threat, those skills have atrophied, and we had to go back. And really what I've seen in my personal experience is the fact that most of the time, and this isn't one size fits all, but most of the time, the only non-commissioned officers who had experience with this were my E7 and above. So everyone, when it came to, now I think we're getting more into the mindset of the simple task to establish a BSA, and we're going to go into of what a BSA is and everything like that when we talk about BCT sustainment. But there's a quartering party, all these fundamentals that I didn't find that in my NCO corps, because we had just been so focused on this counterinsurgency. So this is a little outside, I was going to say, a little outside the realm, but it helps me kind of go through and understand everything. So does anyone by any chance know the 4 near-peer threats that are listed in FM30? If you can give me one, I'll take that too.
Ma'am, I think it's Russia, North Korea, Iran, and China.
Yes! Impressive. So I thought that was crazy too. Like when I first read FM30, I remember back when it like first came out, I was super excited. And on a note on that, I just actually saw, so one of the things that was really cool about FM30 is that pretty early on after it was published, that there was the audio recording. And I don't know if any of you guys are like I am. I try to do 150 bajillion things, and I only have a limited amount of time in the day. And so I started really enjoying audio recordings. And after I did a lot of study into FM30 because I ended up writing something for 23rd Quartermaster Brigade, but that's another aside. But that's really how my interest in FM30 was peaked. It was actually before I was an instructor. And so with that, I listened to it on audio recording, and actually there were just a bunch of additional audio recordings released. So if you're interested in listening to regulations because you're trying to do it while you're like doing 100 other things, which is me every single day of my life, there are actually a bunch of brand new audio recordings, and I think they're mostly 80 ADPs, but I just saw a whole new list. So if you like audio recordings, or if you're an audio, if that's how you learn, which is that I'm actually a visual learner, but there are tons of people that do learn really well that way. Check it out, because those audio recordings are awesome, and it can just help you, especially while you're here. Like if you're out walking and you like listening to something, like that's a great tool, an easy way to kind of squeeze stuff in, because I'd be lying if I told you you're gonna have a ton of time to read regulations as a platoon leader. Like I did not. As a platoon leader, you are busy. It's just every day. I mean, the grind of being a platoon leader is pretty intense. So anytime that you have the opportunity to kind of expand your mind and just be introduced to it, so you can have an idea also later on of where to find things. I think there are a bunch of new audio recordings were just released. And there's a really positive. I think it was the FM30 was really positively received when it comes to audio recording. So I know it's a little bit of an aside, but just some general topics to kind of get you in the mindset of what it is that we're talking about. So exactly where we're going. So we're going for this simultaneity, we're going for depth, and we're going for synchronization. So synchronization it's the arrangement of military actions, but really it enables that maximum relative combat power at a decisive place and time. So you'll see your simultaneity, you'll see your depth, you'll see your synchronization. All of these have to work together in unified land operations. And finally, so I'm going to call on, let's see, I will think of someone that I saw this morning to tell us more about flexibility. I'm going to talk to Lieutenant Aduro. Tell us about flexibility.
I wasn't expecting that, ma'am. Good morning. Anyway, I would say, just like it says the a versatile mix of capabilities, formations, and equipment for conducting operations. So it's basically not being restricted to like a particular way of doing things, but being able to adapt different capabilities. Let's say coming from the side, the point of logistics, like you have transportation coming in, you have aviation coming in, you have intel coming in, and all that coming together, and not just, and it's, I mean, the flexibility also is kind of in line with the synchronicity. So just being able to, I mean, approach the operations in several ways, not being limited to just land as infantry, but you can also have the aviation power and all of that. I hope I'm making sense.
That was wonderful. I was going to say, I like that, exactly what you're talking about. And I think the OE variables that you talked about, those just make that even more important. So you never know what those OE variables are going to be, and we have to be able to react, and they would be different on different with different threats. And like that's such that point that we have that flexibility is so critical. So I do need you to know these 4 tenets. So I do need you to know the 4 tenets of unified land operations. Now we're just going to quickly hit on sustainment of decisive action. So decisive action, it doesn't change those 4 that we talked about earlier that I'm going to tell you. Offense, defensive, or offense, defense, stability, and defense support of civil authorities. These tasks they all make up those unified land operations. So what are we going to say? So this is the term, I said we're kind of learning those key words today and going over when we're talking about unified land operations, we're hitting a lot of the buzzwords that you'll hear in the Army. So extending operational reach and enabling freedom of action and of endurance. Those terms, that is what we do as logisticians. That is what sustainment of decisive action is all about. Extending operational reach, enabling freedom of action and freedom of endurance. So if you're wondering, what do I want to do as a logistician? That is what you want to do. That is the right answer, because we want to enable those commanders. So what does that mean? How do we kind of get into, extending that operational reach, freedom of action, freedom of endurance? Tell me what that means to you. I'll let anyone, because this one's a little bit hard. Anyone go ahead and take a stab at that.
Pardon me, ma'am. This is Lieutenant Benson. And
Go ahead.
What I believe it means is that we are giving the maneuver commanders the ability to do what they want. So basically providing them with multiple ways to support and sustain their operations in order to meet the commander's intent and end states.
That's perfect. You never want to be when I'm thinking of maneuver operations, you never want logistics to be that limiting factor. That's exactly what you're hitting at. So I think that's a great definition. And I think that getting in that mindset of how critical it is, that what a critical piece that is, sustainment is in that practice, I think is really, really good. So awesome. So we talked a little bit about our sustainment of decisive action, and then we will go through and talk about a little bit about offense, defensive, and we're going to go through and talk about it. So offense, what do I want you to know about offense? Defeat and destroy the enemy. Defeat and destroy the enemy. That is what the offense does. It enables us to seize terrain, resources, and population centers, but defeat and destroy enemy forces. That is at the heart of what the offense is. Now, what about defense? So a defensive task is designed to defeat an enemy attack, gain time, economize forces, and develop favorable conditions for the offense. So we need to defeat an enemy attack, offense versus defense. Those are really kind of our fundamentals. So where do we get into stability and defense support of civil authorities? A lot of times I get a lot of questions because you start to read these definitions and you start to see like, okay, stability, and then you see defense support of civil authorities and you read the definition, you're like, wait, those two sound quite a bit alike. Yes, I agree with you. They sound quite a bit alike. But if you're wondering the difference between stability and defense support of civil authorities, there's a really key buzzword for stability. The key buzzword for stability is OCONUS. OCONUS. So if you're conducting stability tasks, you are conducting them outside of the United States. So outside of the United States. If you're conducting defense support of civil authorities, you are conducting them within the United States. So it's designed for domestic emergencies, law enforcement support, etc. So these stability tasks, what are they designed to do? They are designed to reestablish a safe and secure environment and provide essential government services. Who can give me an emergency infrastructure reconstruction and humanitarian relief? Who can give me an example of a stability task?
Ma'am, Lieutenant.
Yeah, go ahead.
Lieutenant Gladys here. I was just going to mention building schools in Iraq, Afghanistan, etc.
Great. So you're hitting the nail on the head. That's exactly what we're that's exactly what we're talking about. You're talking about, emergency infrastructure, reconstruction, anything like that. That's great. Who else can give me another example?
I mean, this is Lieutenant Colorado.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so this is kind of like what I do in my civilian job and what ties into my unit because I work at FEMA. So like one of the main things you want to do is you want to establish infrastructure, build roads that have been destroyed. Then you want to go and establish a like the power grid, and to get the supplies in, you want to find an airfield. And if you don't have an airfield, you want to build one. And then so once you've got those foundations, it makes the logistics processes go a lot more smoother.
Exactly. So you just hit on a lot of different things, but the emergency infrastructure you talked about, and then you also kind of talked about humanitarian relief and the process that goes about it. That's perfect. Now, specifically asking, this is kind of a follow-on question because you said you work with it in real life. Tell us about the projects. Have you worked DISCA or have you worked stability? What have you worked specifically? Tell us about it, and then we can work through it. What have you done in your civilian job? What projects have you worked on specifically?
So some projects we worked on is like I'm on the hurricane team. So what we do is we get sent out to Texas and Florida, Louisiana, and a lot of our partners are actually the National Guard.
Yeah.
And so the moment that there's an emergency declared, the Guard goes out there with us, and we try to set up camps, try to get everybody safe. That's the first thing, and then they start working on infrastructure. It's like the number one thing you got to do when you go there. So it's mostly just trying to stabilize like the infrastructure. Then you could start working on the local economy.
Perfect. So what you're talking about right there is defense support of civil authorities. So she just highlighted that she works at FEMA on the civilian side of the house, and that one of their key tie-ins is the National Guard. Ding, 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 defense support of civil authorities. So you highlighted Texas, Louisiana, and somewhere else, but I forgot. But those locations inside of the continental United States, defense support of civil authorities. And that's exactly what we do. Now, what I will tell you is, and we can go a little bit more into depth of this if you want to at some point, if this is really interesting to you, but what I will tell you is that when it comes to defense support of civil authorities, you highlighted the fact, Lieutenant Colorado, that you worked a lot with the National Guard. The National Guard actually has a little bit more flexibility in conducting defense support of civil authorities than your normal active duty Army. So just knowing and understanding, if you're ever interested in that, it's not part of the bullet curriculum, but I was super interested in it. And so I learned a lot more about it, which is a pretty fun, interesting topic. If you guys are interested, I'll ask probably at the end of this week-ish what you guys want to learn, and make sure that we can kind of tailor your bullet experience to enable you to learn about things that you're interested in, if that's one of them. I was particularly interested in it too, understanding authorities and stuff like that. But defense support of civil authorities. You highlighted the fact that you tied into the National Guard. So the National Guard is a really, really common entity that works for domestic emergencies, which is, if you're on the hurricane team, domestic emergencies, that's exactly what they're going to do. So what are we going to do? We're going to provide whatever it is that's needed that we have, essentially. A lot of times what I've heard about is we're going to learn about slicker teams. So slicker teams, shower, laundry, all of these things, really critical logistics assets. I would say logistics plays a huge role in defense support of civil authorities. Another way I've heard about it used is a lot of people have experience with EOD. So tying in with additional EOD resources for different events, like big events, sometimes the support will be requested. But we're talking about in the United States of America, domestic emergencies, law enforcement, anything else where we as an organization and it's at the request of, I was going to say, at the request. So it's always requested. We never, I shouldn't say we identify the need. So it is always at the, for the National Guard, it can be at the governor's request, but we're always at the request of civil authorities. So never is this done without being requested by civil authorities. We are only doing defense support of civil authorities at the request of civil authorities. Now, I want to go back really quickly talking about stability tasks. So we are doing essentially very similar things where everything that Lieutenant Colorado mentioned, so that power grid, those roads, everything like that, stability task is essentially the same thing. It's just doing that outside the United States. So that's really, when we're talking about these things, a lot of people get confused, but that's really the key difference in when we're talking about stability tasks versus defense support of civil authorities. So obviously, defense support of civil authorities, it comes with, certain authorities they have to be familiar with to know and understand kind of our left and right limits. There's certain things that, can't be done, blah, blah, blah. But that gets at the heart of the issue. So really right now, I love to open this up. So I want to hear about, especially if you're in the National Guard, and you said, Lieutenant Colorado, you worked the hurricane, you worked hurricane relief. Have you worked in the one that was like a year ago in Texas?
I believe that was Hurricane Laura.
Yeah.
That was right when I got hired, so I was not on that team yet.
So what ones have you worked so far? Tell us about what you've worked so far.
So most of my focus is on the Delmarva Peninsula. So after Laura hit, there was a lot of damage in Delaware, Virginia, Maryland. So this is my AO here. And what we do is we try to find all our field support areas, and they are mostly National Guard bases or Air National Guard bases. And my job I'm in Region 3, so I'm the transportation planner. And so what we do is we try to make the most efficient routes for shuttles and for commercial vehicles from each field support area to our disaster site. And so our the most vulnerable place is on the Delaware shore. So we picked like Rehoboth Beach. So we picked out Dover Air Force Base, Shepherd's Field in West Virginia, Fort A.P. Hill, and then we've got contingencies, which are Fort Bragg and Fort Dix. And then so the Guard is already ready there. They got pre-positioned stock. And so what we do is we do drills to make sure that we could make sure the timing and the routes are well. And then in the case of a bridge or a tunnel shutting down, we do exercises where we have to fix alternate routes. And then we have to time it and see how quickly we can move. So like our biggest priorities are always like petroleum, water, and supplies. So the cost of the supply.
That's awesome. I was gonna say like that gives us a great idea of everything that you kind of go through and everything that's in coordination. What about everyone else? What have you done, especially National Guard? Have you worked any of these operations that essentially Lieutenant Colorado talked about? And what have you done? Anyone in Puerto Rico work anything? I've heard some cool stories from Puerto Rico. Anyone else? I see an SR hand, but I don't know. Lieutenant Rodriguez, tell us about what you've done, what you've seen.
So, ma'am, my previous assignment was with the 24th Weapons and Mass Destruction Civil Support Team. It's essentially a CBRN emergency response unit. And a lot of our missions involve just high-profile events like the New York Marathon, the Boston Marathon. In fact, my team was supporting the Massachusetts CST in 2013 when the Boston bombing happened. We were there conducting patrols, helping local authorities, and that's a lot of what our job entailed, is working with local police, FBI, a lot of three-digit agencies to support these events for security purposes and to respond in a situation where there is a weapon of mass destruction used.
That's awesome. So you worked in Boston. You said you worked the marathons. Have you worked what other cool events have you done?
So we worked the New Year's Eve ball drop in Times Square, the Thanksgiving Day parade in New York, the 4th of July fireworks show, when the playoffs come to New York, like the Mets and Yankees. One year we had the Super Bowl in New Jersey, but the Super Bowl Boulevard, which is like the big event for people to participate in, that was in Times Square. The Jones Beach Air Show. A lot of times also other states will request assistance because their events are so huge, they need a lot of support. So we'll send soldiers out to other states to assist their National Guard unit as well with providing support for these events.
That's awesome. Has anyone like been on orders for a period of time with their state specifically and worked on, there's some teams at different states that kind of tie in and have a lot of cool experiences too? Anyone worked on orders? No. Lieutenant Hill. Yeah, tell us about your experiences.
So this is Second Lieutenant Kwan. So when I was active duty enlisted soldier as an engineer, I was actually in decisive mission, which is like a work underneath FEMA. We had a stateside deployment mission 2 times in Indiana. mosquito talk. So I think that was pretty cool experience.
What did you do in Indiana?
So it was like pretty much like a saving people, repelling, breaking concrete, stuff like that.
Interesting. I was gonna say I don't very interesting Indiana experience. I don't think of a lot going on in Indiana, but yes, yeah, that's really, I was gonna say, like you're saying, like very very interesting mission set. Then you never know exactly like that when they're gonna need and what is going to be needed. So that's awesome. What else? What else have other people? I saw Lieutenant Hill. Did you
Yes, ma'am. My unit, I was armored beforehand, Cav, out of New Jersey. So we were activated for the Capitol mission, and I actually used to work for the Capitol Police as a police officer. So that was a very interesting time, per se. So working with a lot of those agencies and whatnot, and utilizing some of my contacts still at the Capitol Police, just trying to coordinate and essentially get things under control with things down there. Essentially, it was very interesting, and pretty much how I guess DACA really comes into play with all the other hierarching federal agencies. I also work at the I currently work at the State Department, and during the summer I was involved in the summer riots. So it was pretty interesting coordinating with National Guard units as well as a civilian to pretty much secure the areas around Constitution Ave and the area down there, because we're about 4 to 5 blocks away from the White House. So a lot of that stuff kind of spilled over towards us, even though the State Department's kind of tucked away and no one really knows what the building looks like or what it is. But as law enforcement, we're kind of targeted in a way. So it was interesting just coordinating intel essentially every single day and our roll call and everything like that with National Guard units, 3-letter agencies, and the local law enforcement.
Now, when you talked about the Capitol Police support and that you did, what did you actually, like, what was your mission set? What did you actually do when you were working, when you said you worked with them as a member of the National Guard, right?
Yes.
Or just,
but I used to be a police officer there, but I left before all of this happened. But I still know contacts there. Basically, we were security mission, essentially. Local patrols around the Capitol grounds and area, looking for suspicious activity, any intel bulletins from the Secret Service and other agencies coming in, like potential demonstrations happening on a daily basis. Essentially, getting that intel was kind of very frequent, actually, almost every single day. And pretty much the threats that were coming in but really didn't populate. So that's basically what we were doing, getting bolos of any suspicious individuals in the area and things of that nature, and reacting essentially to that contact in a way, and dealing with it along with the local and federal partners.
That's awesome. I was going to say, it really depends. I was going to say what you're going to do varies so greatly based on what the need is. So very cool experience to work there. Now I see another hand, but I can't tell who it is. Come on up on the net if you have another discus story to share with us.
Hey, this is Lieutenant Owings. Whenever Hurricane Sally hit South Alabama earlier this summer, I was pulled in by my unit. I live 15 minutes from the unit, and I was basically the closest officer, and they were like, hey, can you come in and head this up? And so for a period of about a week and a half, me and about 20 other soldiers were tasked with, I'm in a line haul company, so we were tasked with transporting water, MREs, and I think a forklift was one of them, down to South Alabama. We went down and back about every day for about 6-7 days, and in support of that and went to about 6 locations on that. So
that's amazing. I was gonna say, like, those essential services. Did you find that experience particularly rewarding? I know just from some of the other students that they just said like it was actually super rewarding to be part of that.
Yes, ma'am. We it was very rewarding because I kind of grew up, down there. My grandmother lived down there for about 10 years. And that's kind of like the home away from home. And so whenever I was able to go down there and see those people, really getting the help they needed and being able to support them, it was really rewarding. It was kind of like a hometown feeling, so it was really nice being able to, help those people out in their time of need.
I think that's one of the coolest things is a lot of the stories you're saying personal ties to the community as well as having the opportunity to really help someone. I've just heard a lot, like the resounding feeling was just that people found it very rewarding. So while obviously the situation's unfortunate, you never want storms to hit. You never want people to be without food. You never want people to be without water. That's not ideal. That you're able to provide that, I think, is super cool. And like you're saying, like just you happen to be close. You're 15 minutes away. You can just hop on the truck and go. Like that's a really cool experience that you got to provide. I see another hand. Who else has a DISCA experience?
Ma'am, that's me, Lieutenant DeLeo. And I apologize for before, but I had a story question kind of thing here. When I was on active duty at Fort Lewis, my unit got a call to take part in wildfire fighting in Northern California. I couldn't make it because I was beginning my PCS process for green and gold. But how often is it something that happens to an active duty unit? I know that's mostly a National Guard situation, but my unit and then a few others on active duty were sent there. I don't know if that was a money situation. I'm not sure, but I just thought that was an interesting story to bring up and ask you about.
Very interesting. I was going to say, in my entire time, I've prepared for one storm specifically that was in North Carolina, like a storm in North Carolina, but we didn't even get called to go. So like you're saying, like, who knows what, I don't think that it's as common in active duty. Like in the National Guard, I would tell you a lot of people have a lot of experiences, especially doing DISCA, like just within their state. So I think it's much more common, and they also have additional authorities to do it under. So it can be at the request of the governor when you're talking specifically about the National Guard. So I think I would say more frequently in the National Guard than on active duty. But the wildfire thing is super cool. And I do think the California National Guard, it's almost like from what I've heard, it's almost like a standing need. And the wildfires in California, I was gonna say, this is a side, but just watching a documentary on it, like probably 3 weeks ago, is that like, I mean, there in the last couple of years, they've been just crazy. Like it's getting worse and worse. So I do think there is kind of like a pretty consistent need for National Guard soldiers in California during wildfire season. And I do think that's kind of like a pretty standard, like constant tie-in. But I do think that it is more frequently that you see DISCA completed by the National Guard than in active duty.
Roger. Thank you, ma'am.
Awesome. Who else has something? I see another hand. Who else has something to add?
Ma'am, Lieutenant Cruz.
Go ahead.
In Puerto Rico, we presence the Hurricane Maria. I'm not part of the Guard or anything, but I believe that all Puerto Ricans work together to clear the streets up because it was the largest blackout in U.S. history. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And there was 3,000 deaths. So it's not a factor of being part of the Guard to help each other out because, like I said before, it was the largest blackout. We were inspecting it because we had a hurricane prior than that, and it just changed route. So everybody was like shocked at it.
It's true. I was gonna say natural disasters can really, really devastate some areas. So you weren't part of the National Guard yet when that happened, but you were there?
No, I wasn't. I'm not part of the Guard, but until they took action, well, like civilians took action, like clearing the streets and everything. Because people that live in the countryside, they couldn't have access to anywhere. And the power, it took a long time, about 6 months or more, to the people in the countryside to get power.
That's just so devastating for an area. I mean, like we were talking about how important it is to get that infrastructure in place. It's just absolutely necessary. I see another hand. Go ahead, whoever has something. I don't even have an initial for you, but go ahead if you have another DISCA story to share with us.
Hello, ma'am. It's Lieutenant Hernandez. Can you hear me? So just following up with the California wildfires. So I personally haven't taken part in a mission. However, I'm from Southern California, so we deal with a lot of fires. I just wanted to add that the fires in Southern California, I can't speak to Northern California, we're moving so fast that local and city resources were like just completely like depleted within like the first 24 hours. And the situation was like really bad. So like the highways were full with like the wildfires on both sides of the highways. And what would happen is that the freeways would get so hot that people's tires would pop. So they couldn't evacuate people via freeway. And pretty much just every resource in Southern California had to be used to like help stop the fires. So at the time I was working at the Marine Corps Air Station down in Miramar in San Diego. And every day they were launching Ospreys and they were coordinating with like the Air Force National Guard, Army National Guard. And it was just an all-out brawl to stop the fire. And it got so bad that like a lot of cities were cut off to the point where like more and more resources had to be poured into Southern California in order to evacuate people from the mountains.
I mean, those wildfires are no joke. I was gonna say, and like you're saying, it just takes so many resources. And from what I understand, this season is actually getting longer and longer. And I think that's a really, really difficult challenge that I think you're going to see a lot of tie-in from a lot of different organizations. So that's so true. Anyone else? I was going to say, anyone else to add for any other DISCA that we want to talk about? Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you guys sharing. As I say, it's always helpful to hear about different things that your classmates have done, and because they're very interesting. And I also think that one of the cool things about DISCA that we hear like consistently, I know we talked about providing some security, but a lot of times it really does involve logistics. So, and that's so cool when you're talking about if you're bringing the food and your MREs and your water to Alabama, or you're bringing showers in Texas, or whatever it is that you're doing, a lot of those resources that are those, essential services that we're talking about, a lot of those actually hit into the sustainment realm. And so it's cool that we get to be a part of so many of those. And I think if you're in the Guard, it won't surprise me at all if you have the opportunity to do that. And a lot of times, Lieutenant Owings, were you the only officer on all those runs that you made in Alabama?
For the majority of the time, yes. They had to pull another guy for another run because we had to split. We had later in the week we had to actually do 2 runs during one day, and they had to pull another guy to come in for the other serial. But yes, for the most part, yes.
That's what I've consistently heard in a lot of DISCA stories too, is that a lot of times it is just like the lieutenant. So it's such a cool leadership opportunity because stuff's not going to go right. I mean, and that's just, when you're involving just Army in general, stuff doesn't go right. But when you're involving other agencies and all this other stuff's never going to go as planned. There's like and I really think that it's a great opportunity to really showcase or for your leadership to kind of learn and understand as a leader, to kind of like get your bearings, meet your team, see strengths within your team, watch watch what people can do in your team. And it's cool because you get tight. You get to be a tight-knit group. And so I think it's a really, really awesome opportunity, especially for National Guard lieutenants. If you guys have the opportunity to do it, and I know sometimes it's difficult because I really don't envy you in trying to manage civilian careers and be in the National Guard or Reserve. I full well understand that it's very difficult. And how difficult that must be to kind of prioritize, and sometimes you might not always be available. But if you have the opportunity to do that and to be a part of DISCA, I think it is so cool. I think you learn a lot. I think you have the opportunity to really get to know some people, and a lot of times it really gives you a great leadership opportunity just to practice. And a lot of times it is just a lieutenant leading the charge. So don't be surprised if that happens to you. I definitely believe that it will happen to many of you that are in the class. I tell you, just take it, run with it, enjoy it. So we've kind of gone through what stability tasks are and what defense support of civil authorities. Now next, I'm a chart person. I love charts. So this really highlights indecisive action. So it gives you the task and purpose for your offense, your defense, your stability and defense support of civil authorities. This is critical for you to know. So offense, movement to contact, attack, exploitation, and pursuit, commonly, but not always in that order. Then you're gonna have your different types of defense. So your mobile defense, your area defense, and retrograde. Know these tasks and purposes. I think that if you understand, obviously we highlighted the fact when we were talking about offense to defeat and destroy the enemy. But if you understand the task and purpose associated with each of these, I think it really goes into helping understand the definition of what they are. And this kind of what this highlights too, when we get the questions about what's the difference between stability and defense support for civil authorities, is this highlights the fact that yes, you're restoring essential services, but support to governance. And you're doing this, conduct security cooperation. We're highlighting that we're working with other partners in order to do all of this in these OCONUS locations. And then when we're talking about inside the continental United States, we're talking about these domestic disasters. We're talking about if there's some need for civilian law enforcement. And you see this, restore essential services. What's the point of, what's the purpose of defense support of civil authorities? And then you see here, one of the tasks is restore essential services. So I do notice the overlap, but if you can just see through and note the big difference is it's CONUS, OCONUS, and as long as you understand that, then I think you're going to be key in understanding that. But I do often get a lot of questions about that. So any questions on anything that we've gone over so far? Perfect. So let's quickly go through. I was gonna say there'll be a natural breaking point in just a minute. So we'll just quickly go through. So mission command of sustainment operations. So I think actually someone used these exact words. So exercise of authority and direction by the commander, but it enables that disciplined initiative. We talked about that. No, actually the words that were used, was art of command and science of control. So yes, you're integrating those warfighting functions to accomplish that decisive action, but this mission command is really enabling it. And like I said, if you don't understand mission command, go back to those principles, and I think that mission command will be clear. So, here are those principles. Can you guys still see it?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
okay,
ma'am.
Perfect. So building those cohesive teams, creating that shared understanding, providing that clear intent, exercising disciplined initiative, using that orders process, and accepting prudent risk. So at the end of the day, mission command, you absolutely have to accept risk. There's inherently risk with mission command. So the idea that you're going to empower, but that still comes with risk. And there is there is risk associated with it. Okay, so we're gonna go through, we see our mission command. Now, we really highlighted these operational and mission variables in the course with Mr. Wilcox. So you're going to see these teams throughout. We're going to go through, and when we are planning our operations, we have to use these. These will absolutely shape the way, and ultimately how knowing and understanding these will be a huge portion in whether our operations are successful. So knowing our operational variables, knowing our mission variables. I know that you guys have already gone into depth in the for these, and we've had a whole class on it. But at the end of the day, these are going to continue to play a factor in your entire planning process. They're not going to go away even once we go through. So let's pause there. This is a good point to pause. And then we will go through a little bit more about the purpose of the offense. I know we already saw that chart, which is really, I think, the meat and potatoes of what we're going to go through next. And I highly recommend that if you have questions about it, go back to that chart that we saw, because it helps me kind of put everything in place. But we're going to go over the purpose of some. So we don't have a Lieutenant Copeland, do we? Lieutenant Copeland? I didn't think so. Okay. I just want to make sure. But with that, just make sure that I'm going to give you a 10-minute break. So we'll come back. It's not an easy, so we've already gone through. We'll come back at 10. I'll give you a little bit. So 10:20, and we'll be ready to go through these. Other than that, do you have any questions? Anything else? Perfect. So I will see you back on at 10:20. Move around because I know these topics are dense. So move around, make sure you stretch, and we'll be back on at 10:20.